open the door and get the streaming going. I was only wrong by an hour. John's like, yeah.
He's sleeping on Bill Esch's bed shop.
Over?
He's going, what the heck?
I was wrong. It's more than half an hour. Okay. So, since we had some delays, I will reopen citizen participation. Going once for citizen participation, going twice. Okay, seeing none, we'll close that. We'll move on to consent agenda. One motion and a second will approve all the following items. Any item may be pulled from the list and voted on separately.
Move to approve the consent agenda?
I'll second that.
Any questions or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 1, under miscellaneous business, discussion and possible direction to staff regarding TID 5 formation. You see the presentation here from Ellers and the proposed boundaries, and we're aware of some of the changes in code. Or is this something that we wish to pursue at this time and provide direction to staff?
I think we hold off at this time.
Okay, so we want to direct staff to pause on that. I think we have some meetings
think
coming up. We
Pause
should
on
cancel
that and
those.
Bring
When-
back more information as it's
Okay,
available.
when staff's ready. Okay. Any concerns on that? You good, Chris? You good, Kayla? All right. Thank you. Thank you, Keith. Have a good night. Okay. Item 2, consider request for funding from Booth Lake Memorial Park for $1,500 to support the Lake District and efforts to reduce Eurasian milfoil. Come on up. Just can you come up? Hit the button there that's on the right and state your name and give us the overview.
Don Vaccarello, Chairman of the Booth Lake Management District. Thanks for giving me a few minutes to speak today on an important subject of the accelerated growth of milfoil on Booth Lake. Kind of a little bit of a history. We've had milfoil, Booth Lake's had milfoil for decades now. And in the beginning, we had some volunteers who would scuba dive down, pull it as it would come up, which is the best way to get rid of an invasive species like Eurasian milfoil. But because of the aggressive nature of the plant itself, over years, the couple of guys that were pulling these weeds, became more and more difficult. They started doing some spot treatment with a herbicide while they were underwater to kill it. But again, over time, this just became a much more difficult process. So we contracted out to a lake biologist company that would come by through the lake every year, do a meandering study, and implement a herbicide treatment in the areas that they would find the milfoil. That was, the process each year until more recently. The herbicide that we were using is called fluoridone, and it was banned by the DNR on our lakes because it also attacks non-native species, the good kind of plants you want in the lake. And so they recommended us going to Priscillacor, which is a much more expensive herbicide. And the first time we tried it, it didn't work at all. So we found when we went back the next year that the areas that we had treated the milfoil showed no, evidence that it had been treated, and it was as aggressively growing as the areas that we hadn't treated.
So leave it to the DNR, right?
Well, what we learned subsequently is that Booth Lake has a hybrid mutated version of milfoil that is more resistant, and the manufacturer's requirement for that is a heavier concentration than what was used. But we didn't know that at the time, and we pivoted over to starting to cut and harvest it, which is kind of an inexact science, and if you don't have your own equipment, it becomes very, very expensive and hard to kind of get your contractors when you need them. Cutting and harvesting is like mowing your lawn. You have to keep coming out each year. It's very expensive. But we did this year go through the same process of doing a meandering study. The biologist provided some evidence of where the milfoil is again this year. And if I may show you, it's basically rimmed the entire lake. The whole lake where the shallow waters are, where any kind of a plant can grow, is now encompassed in the milfoil. It's thick, it's very aggressive, and it tends to choke out the native plants. At the same time, we did a test of another concentration level of the Priscillicore, and this is another lake, and you can see where the red lines are, the area that we had cut and harvested, and then this one yellow area here, we used a section of the lake to retest the Priscillicore. And the good news is it did come through positively. It did manage to eliminate the milfoil. And one more photo for you, and I'll get out of your way here. This, I don't know if you're going to be able to tell what this is, but this is my hand holding a bunch of dead milfoil, and in the middle of it, you see this green. This is spiny naiad, which is the good kind of plants we want on it. So we've learned that the manufacturer's claims that it does identify only the stuff you want out to be killed was a good sign, and it does work, and the other plants remained active and healthy. So that was the good news. Unfortunately, this has become a really expensive proposition. It's significantly more expensive than the Floridone that we used to use. The concentration level has made it to a point where it's now up to $40,000 to treat our lake when we do it. Now, we wouldn't have to do it every year. The manufacturer says you can expect that to be effective for about a 3-year period. So, and that includes year one. So on the 3rd year, we'd probably have to do this again. I presented this information to the park board to see if there was any opportunity to get some participation from them with regard to helping the 90. We have 90 households on Booth Lake that are, footing the bill for this. I presented a budget in July to the group and got approval for a 52% increase in the annual assessments to cover this. And quite frankly, we're going to be cutting into our reserves to even with that increase. So we're hoping that the area where we have milfoil, I think I showed you the full lake version of this, but there's also a section that we had isolated on a photo here that identified the 3 acres that are from the boat launch to the end of the beach and out a couple hundred yards where the milfoil is growing. That represents, those 3 acres represent 11% of the total acreage that we need to treat. Even though the lake is over 100 acres, it's about 27 acres is that perimeter around it that we pay to get treated. So 3 acres out of 27 is 11%. The cost of treating the lake is about $1,500 an acre. $1,500 times 3 acres is the $4,500 that we went to the park board to ask for some participation in.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
I was reading the staff report, the committee report for Booth Lake, and it said that it appeared that this milfoil is growing erratically due to the amount of nitrogen that's washing off of the lawns. Have you done any study there, or is everybody still fertilizing their lawns? at
We
Booth
do,
Lake?
we do water quality studies actually 3 times a year through the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. We send samples out, they do it, they send it back. That is an issue. Booth Lake is fed 3 ways. It's through precipitation, ground water runoff, and underground. So, if there are, salt being put on the roadways, that's running into it, and so our sodium and chloride go up. Nitrogen from fertilizers, a lot of agricultural, a lot of farms around Booth Lake contribute to that. There's no, what we try to do is keep any runoff from septic systems, because we have to have our septic systems cleaned and inspected once every 3 years. It's part of the assessment that gets done. But things do run in there, and mostly it's from runoff from the fertilizers.
Anything else from your perspective as from the board? So I guess, one, thanks for coming and talking to us about it. Pictures are always nice. I guess, so is this going to be built into the budget, like going forward from what the park's going to come back to us and the other municipalities for?
We'll ask for that.
This is
Each
gonna have to be
municipality.
something that's gonna be done annually though, correct? It's
Every-
it's not a 3 times and you're out.
It's actually every 3 years. So it would be the equivalent of $1,500 a year, because but we do it every 3 years. So we'd ask for $4,500, and then there's nothing for year 2, nothing for year 3, and then the 4th year it would be another treatment.
So are you looking for, and is the park board looking for us to do 1,500 now and then?
1,500 for, I think, next year.
Okay, so
right?
next
For
year.
next year. correct?
For 2025. The treatment would take place in the spring of '25.
Okay, and so there'll be, and then 26 and 27, 28, it'd be 500, we'll just do set-asides, right?
Yep, 500 a year, yep.
Okay. So, but up and then down. Okay. All right. So it's not a 24 thing, it's a 25 thing.
It's not gonna be 1,500 a year is what we're getting at. It's
No,
gonna
yeah,
be-
no,
just off the start.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Jeremy's right, though. The cost is probably gonna be going up in a couple of years after the fact.
Well, then we'll do, I mean, and I would look to your board
Sure.
to work with the park board.
Right.
They'll pass that along in their budget request.
Yes.
So, for us, we're not, I don't think anybody here is opposed to $1,500 for that, so. So I would just, I'm going to make a motion that we would accept the park board putting in a line item for $1,500 in their 25 budget. And then we will do an annual smoothing out as appropriate as costs change based upon what the lake board comes back to the park board on.
I'll second that.
Any questions or discussion? You good? Okay, you just give me that look. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Don, appreciate it.
Yeah, this kind is, I'm out of practice. I'm out of practice. Okay. Yeah, so I want to take, I want to skip item 3. We'll come back to it. I want to take item 4 out of order. We have Victor Stanford here. So item 4 is update from Victor on his work at 2954 Main Street, the renovation. Come on up.
Good evening. How we doing tonight? Absolutely. So at this point, we're pretty much done with the interior demo. We are a little bit behind the schedule that we had initially proposed at this point. Part of that is due to closing a month later than we had initially expected, and To be honest, it's just taken a little bit more time to reevaluate things as we got into it. I mean, with going into it, we had 3 opportunities to see the house before we got in there and owned it, so plans had to change a little bit. But what you guys have now, what I sent out to you, is pretty much exactly what we've got for our proposed plans at this point. We're at a point now where things are going to start happening pretty quickly. So we've got our financing that should be all taken care of by the middle of this month here. We're going to get our permits submitted probably by the end of the week here. We just got our engineer to sign off on a couple of things. So just wanted to be here to answer any questions for you guys, because I don't know that I'm going to be able to make this happen again with the baby coming in the end of September here.
Well, first, congratulations.
Thank you.
And, yeah, no, thanks for the update here, and as I said before, pictures are always nice. Anything you've discovered, I know you talked about a timeline issue with the closing and whatnot, but anything you discovered once you started the demo that gives you a timeline concern?
No, not really. It was just kind of, things had to change just a little bit here and there based off of engineering and things like that. So, and just kind of figuring out, what was behind the walls. So, to be honest with you, the things that we found inside of the walls were pretty much all good things. We were able to reuse our electrical service, so that saved us a little bit of money there. We're hoping that we might be able to save a little bit with the sewer lateral. We're not sure where we're at with that yet, but so good things so far.
Any questions for Victor?
Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Thank you.
That's all we had. Thanks for coming in.
I got a couple questions, if you don't mind. Sorry,
Not
John. Your scheduling as far as for the inside, or I'm sorry, for the exterior work, I'm assuming you're going to be doing that first before you work
Yeah.
on the inside.
Yep.
Then, roofing, you're going to put a new roof on?
No, the roof's in great shape.
It is?
Yep.
Do you know how old it was?
I don't know the exact age of it, but, without that, I think that roof was probably put on shortly after the most recent owner before us sold or took possession of it. Without
Okay.
that new roof, I think the whole house would have been a crumbling mess, so
Yeah.
that saved us.
And is there any tuck point needed in there?
Yes,
And you
so,
got a point- that's what I was getting at.
yep.
Is you want to get on that
Oh,
before it gets
absolutely.
into cold weather.
Yeah, yep. So the next stages are, we got to get through our permitting process, but we are going to be adding on to the back and to the side of it. So we're going to be starting to dig out for foundations as quickly as we can here. Then we've got tuck pointing, and we're going to be moving some brick around for windows and things like that.
You good, 40? Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
All right, let's get
Thanks,
home.
guys. Have
Thank
a
you.
great night.
Okay, we'll go back to item 3, consider status of agreement with tourism entity and direction to staff regarding room tax payments. Vanessa was not able to be here this evening. You see Eileen's memo. Anything, Eileen, you want to add to the timeline discussion?
Yes.
I'll let you get to it before I make you answer questions.
So everybody's aware that the chamber has designated the tourism entity in 2016 due to state law changes. In 2023, after some discussions, the board decided we wanted to formalize that relationship with an agreement. It really was just a motion that had been made in 2016. Prior to those state law changes, a percentage of the room tax went to the airport, a percentage went to the railroad, and a percentage went to the Park and Recreation Department. With a state law change, 70% goes to the chamber, 30% goes to our Park and Rec Department now. So we designated them as our tourism entity at that time. So when the board directed, we had started working on an agreement with Attorney Pruitt. He had gotten a draft and we sent it over to the chamber. Shortly after, they had a very large turnover on their board. So we continued to make those room tax payments, those quarterly payments through the year of 2023, periodically reminding them of that agreement. We had not gotten any feedback from the agreement that we sent them. So the reason it's before you is we have not made any 2024 payments yet. So far, we have the quarter one room tax, quarter two room tax. As I mentioned in my memo, Lori's working on. The hotel was late. There's a new owner, so she's been working with them on getting those to us in a timely manner. We did get a meeting with some members of the chamber board to talk about that agreement. They felt that the agreement was too burdensome for the chamber. There was quite a bit of detail, as you probably saw. So they sent us a MOU. We have sent those back to them with some suggested changes. So I looked at that original agreement and said, well, what are the core things that were in that agreement, and what are things that I remember that the board had specifically requested? So we put those in there. So far, we have not gotten feedback from them on that MOU. So I'm looking for direction on whether the board will approve us paying those room tax payments. I didn't feel comfortable as a staff member authorizing those any longer, since we're not in compliance with the board's direction of an agreement, and then further discussion by the board on the status of the agreement and any direction you want to provide on that.
How long have you been waiting?
For feedback on the agreement, the original agreement was sent to them in April of 2023. So April 6th of 2023, we sent the original agreement. Then when we met with them in June, they said they'd send us a MOU. We received that example on July 9th. On July 17th, they sent it back with their modifications and have not heard back since.
Okay, so they've had the modifications for about 3 weeks?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I can't help but be disappointed at the lack of responsiveness by this organization that we're sponsoring with tax dollars. I would be very reluctant to release any payments at this time to the chamber. And I have to wonder if there's ever been a financial audit of the chamber. I wonder what they're doing with the funds that they do get, quite frankly. I'm very disappointed. This is nonsense. This is certainly not a way to run a business. Good Lord.
I agree, John. I think until we get a better response, I would not want to release any money.
I have one question. Eileen, just for the sake of discussion now, who is our accountant? Who does our at the end-
Johnson Block.
Okay, Johnson Block. What would it take for them to look at what we're giving the chamber and see what they're doing with it jives with what they're supposed to do? Yeah, something like that. You could call it that. But I'm just, so that because I know there's been a couple of times we've asked Vanessa to come in and explain where the money that they got from us went. And they give us an expense sheet of where all the money's spent, but it doesn't say where the money from the tourism goes and what it's being used for. And I think an audit would tell that better.
Are you thinking an audit before releasing the money and the agreement, or what are your thoughts?
I think that's a little late right now, but what I'm getting at, though, is once this debacle gets all cleared up and straightened out, then maybe it would have to be an audit system that follows up annually so that we know what's going on over there with the money they're getting from the village through the Tourism Council.
Yeah, maybe we need to add that to the agreement. I don't know if we have that in there.
You know, the other option would be, I mean, the state statute does allow you to set up your own commission that would handle those funds, and then that commission could turn around and do deals individually with the chamber on specific projects. That would kind of build in another layer of accountability that they have to have Fortunately, it's one more body that you guys would then have to staff, which complicates things.
Yes, I agree. I am not in favor of giving our staff more commission overhead on something that, I mean, it is a large percentage of the chamber's budget. I think they do great events for us. We're looking for transparency and accountability, it sounds like. I'm not sure adding another commission improves transparency and accountability. I think it further muddies the water.
Yeah, exactly. It just add another layer. And please, and I don't mean to be mistaken by my comments. I think we do have really good events that the chamber sponsors. That's not the issue. The issue is, where's the money going? What's being done with it?
Have they asked-
And the reluctance to come into agreement with us for increased communication and transparency.
Have they even asked for the payment yet?
Yes, they have.
I think, I think there's two motions that are needed. One is what to do about payment, and then the second is direction for me and staff on what to do from an agreement standpoint. Or maybe that's one motion, I don't know.
Could I ask Attorney Geary?
But the only provision, I guess, that they could have balked at was, I think, that it required that there would be somebody who would be on their board who would be a village representative, which is not uncommon, frankly. And then that would give you guys the insight in terms of where the money's going and how it's being spent and whatnot. So frankly, we kind of take some of the work off their plate, I would think. But I gather I don't know if that's the sticking point. I don't really know or if it's just the form generally.
That did, at least in our last conversation, wasn't really a sticking point. I think there's concern about some of the tracking and administrative overhead of that, but that's why we kind of said, okay, we'll take a look at, what you're looking at, which was an MOU based on a bit of an unusual structure, but that Whitewater has, but it at least was a framework to start from. And so Eileen took a stab at it. I took a review and said, okay, these are the things we were kind of looking at adding. I would say that most of what we were looking to have was already we gave it the East Troy language, but was basically in the Whitewater agreement. I don't think we were that far off. I think it's what you guys are frustrated about, what I'm hearing is the timeline here. And so I think you're going to have to balance, we are in October, geez, I'm already, I'm on other dates from earlier conversation. We're in August. And, there are other other things coming up. They do depend upon this for their budget. So, but I also understand you don't want to just hand money and now you've lost the negotiation position. So I think you guys provide the direction. I think staff's at the point and I'm at the point where, okay, we've tried.
Yeah, I'm struggling right now with which way to go. Part of me says that we should consider paying the first quarter room tax, but no more until we have some sort of agreement.
Just what's quarter one total dollar amount? That's around, and total annual is what, roughly? What was last year's total annual? I was like, it's like somewhere in the 30,000, 40,000.
Probably.
She's hemming and hawing. She doesn't need us all to hear it.
Payments to the chamber in 2023 totaled 42.5.
So not a lot of overnight stays in the village for January.
This year was a little shy in the first quarter, and I
think it was because of the changeover at the hotel.
Changeover in the hotel. So you would expect, I guess, quarter two to be more significant? Okay.
I would like to think, I'm sorry, but I would like to think that we don't pay anything until the chamber in an august body comes in, 2 or 3 people representing the chamber come in and have a discussion with us, and we get this hammered out one way or another. Because I know if you want to pay them the first quarter, you won't see them. They won't come in.
I was going to say, if I'm asking for a motion.
Just explaining an opinion right now, but if you want a motion, fine, make it a motion.
Before we do, and I guess I can always vote against it, John, I'd like your compromise idea of paying the 47 now, but not an additional dollar until we do come to an agreement with the chamber. You know, we all recognize the good things that they do, but it needs to change before we start paying out more. So
Yeah, and I look at the $4,700, it sounds like, what, 5% of what it would normally be, for the year? So it isn't a lot, but at least it's some sort of, I don't know, would you call that an olive branch? I don't know. I like olives,
None of the
but,
olives, just the branch.
Yeah, maybe, just a stick, I don't know, yeah. But, so I think I'm really leaning toward that we go ahead and.
Why don't you make that a motion?
Yes, I will make that a motion. I'll move that we pay the first quarter room tax of $4,701, and we hold any further payments until we reach an agreement with the Chamber of Commerce about being our tourism agent.
I'll second it.
Do you have any consternation about that phrasing of it? Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion on that?
Yeah, I think if we're going to release the 4,700, can we get a response at least from the agreement by a certain date, like September 1 or something?
Well, I'm going to try to answer your question with the question I was going to ask, which is, when do we think Q2 will be ready?
Right now, I'm waiting for the last payment from the hotel, which it kind of slipped under their radar. He sent it to his accountant, but they are on vacation this week, so I would expect to get it next week. The last time that happened, they actually made an online payment, so it came in very quickly.
So to further, just as we look at calendars here, our next board meeting is the 19th, and then there is no meeting the 2nd because that's Labor Day. So the 16th of September would be the next one. So I guess the question is, is positive progress enough to, and this would be an amendment to your motion, but would positive progress be enough to show, to go ahead and release Q2 to then proceed forward, or no?
Define positive.
I don't, I'm asking.
Because positive
To-
progress could have been, they said.
So that's what I'm
What's that?
saying.
Sorry, I didn't hear what he said.
He's saying, what is positive progress? And so I guess what I'm trying to get to is what you're saying, which is, do we want to include anything, or do we just want it to be hard cutoff?
I like the,
To amend the motion?
do you want me to ask to amend the motion?
I am the chair. I conduct the meeting.
We've been here for a while already. I'll make a amendment to the motion that the response with a formalized agreement should be in place by our September 16th board meeting to release the second payment.
A clarifying question before somebody seconds that. Basically, you're asking to, by September 16th, that this is on our agenda to approve an agreement.
I am.
Okay.
And the agreement is here for us to peruse, yeah.
Okay, so there's a motion to amend the motion. Is there a second on that? Okay, Mary's seconding that. Okay, any questions on the amendment?
So we're going to release the 47?
No. No, he's just, I'm sorry? I know, reverse order, yep. No, what he's saying is, we're not releasing anything unless we have, which would be for us to authorize on the September 16th. Now, if we get it done before then, they can come before. Yeah, so we're voting amendment first. So his amendment would change the original motion to say that everything that John said, but just put a time period on it of we need it by September 16th.
Okay, I'm
Not
a
releasing
little confused because the amendment said that we would release the second payment.
Right.
First quarter should be released.
First quarter was released in the first motion. So, okay, but you just said we're not releasing any, so I just want to clarify.
Yeah, that was my confusion.
Okay.
Okay, recap, please.
Okay. So John's initial motion was release Q1, and we're not releasing Q2 until we have an agreement. The amendment says, let's put a deadline on that. Need to be here by September 16th.
Do we need the deadline? I mean, if we're not paying out the second quarter until we have it, I think that's deadline enough. If they want the second payment, they need to have the agreement completed.
I get you, but we need to expedite it. This thing's been sitting around, getting kicked, the can's been getting kicked down the road for a long time. So all it is, hey, September 16th, we want it, we're going to release that payment. I know we could go forever on it, but it's just kind of that push. Let's get that thing in place.
Just a point of clarification, then, if the topic gets put on the agenda for the 16th, do I release that payment, or do I wait till after that meeting?
Make sure they show up.
What, after the meeting?
Yeah.
You have to wait till after the meeting.
Right.
Okay.
To make sure that we have an agreement.
Because the original motion doesn't change. We won't pay until we have a signed agreement.
All right. Other questions on the amendment? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the amendment carries. So now the amended motion is before us. Any questions or discussion on the total amended motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I need to ask who seconded John's original motion?
40 did.
40 did, thank
And
you.
Mary seconded the amendment.
That one I got, thank you.
Okay, we're on item 5. We're all over the place this evening. Consider possible emergency equipment replacement and funding options for East Troy Area Emergency Services District due to a fire engine transmission failure.
Well, we know it's never good if I show up here, so. All right, so I know some of you made it through our board education shop as we kind of walked through and we kind of discussed how we're running on borrowed time with some of our equipment, but we're trying to spread this out. Well, unfortunately, our one engine 1720 and 1998 Pierce Quantum, the transmission went out on it. So we were unable to pump at a fire the other day with it, and it is currently sitting in Butler at a transmission shop. They were able to track down a remanufactured transmission for it at the price of $23,000. This engine is worth, right from Pierce, on a good day to the right buyer in running condition, $30,000. So last year we spent about $12,500 in repairs on this piece of equipment. And now with this coming through, this is a reman motor. They struggle to find parts for this. Last year, some of our issues were rear drum brakes couldn't be purchased for this. We had to have a machine shop in California make these drum brakes for it. So continually to dump this money in is kind of getting down a dangerous pathway for us.
Not to cut you off real quick,
Yeah,
but
go
I'm going
ahead.
to. It's also 21-year-old.
26 years old.
26-year-old engine.
Yes. And like we kind of discussed, hitting those NFPA standards and stuff, we were trying to push this down due to the cost that's coming in on capital on our end to try to get this back in order and organized. So it was on the docket for 2030 for $1.3 million to replace this piece of equipment out. Well, in lieu of this, going through researching, really analyzing our situation, we came upon this mini pumper idea. And fiscally, it would be saving about $1 million in 5 years on the replacement, where this one is the lowest bid on it, but it meets all the standards. And the other price outs we got from Pierce and Rosenbauer only went up in price in the tune of $430,000, then up to $450,000. Rosenbauer is looking at 2-year build-out time. Pierce will have it coming off the line, but would not give me a date on what off the line means. So this is a time-sensitive situation, and hence the reason why I'm here tonight before you on this, and I trust that you all kind of saw that in your agenda packets, what Eileen released and Lori put out in the packet for everyone. I think Eileen did a nice job laying it out in her memo as well. So there's potentially 2 options out on the table. One's a little more palatable to the tax basin, which is laid out in option 2. Option 1 is kind of coming up with this money now from all the respective municipalities, their portion, which the village portion would be $146,000 of that $365. Otherwise, option 2 was doing a financing option, which allows deferred payment for a year. So first payment on this wouldn't be until September 5th of 2025 per the financing sheet that was supplied to us here. With this option, we had $100,000 put into capital funding for a category of building grounds repairs and upgrades. I'd be making the movement on our end at the district level to reallocate that funding to pay that annual payment for this truck at this point, as, like I said, time's kind of sensitive to us. Right now, we have areas we cannot service with our apparatus that we do have running. So we got sections of our territory that we won't even be able to get one of our pieces of equipment, heavy pieces, down to support fire suppression. So
What's the GPM on this mini pumper versus the older Pierce?
this is 1,500 gallons per minute, so it meets the same as the last engine. So this mini pumper sits about the size lengthwise as an ambulance. So our newer ambulance from 2020, it's the same length as that, and it's only 8 feet tall. So this will allow access into any locations we have in our jurisdictions that we cover in the ETA ESD. Island Drive. Island Drive right now is sitting ducks.
You look like you were going to say something. All right, so, I mean, we'd have to do a separate, like, I guess I'm trying to go back here to, if we did a debt issuance, we'd have to, Ellers would have to come out and we'd have to do that as a separate approval, right?
We don't have to go through Ellers for that. It was presented as a capital lease. So we've done that for our DPW trucks as well, and we don't have to involve Ellers in that. But, you know, as I laid out in my memo, my big concern is if the village is doing that capital lease, we need to have some sort of agreement from the towns that they're going to be paying those payments. I'm not comfortable with the village signing something like that without that.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I'm leaning toward option one, even though there's some tax implications. But I do not like option two. I think that's going to take a long time to actually come to fruition, coming up with an agreement like that. between the municipalities. And I'm really not a fan of the village financing equipment for the district. I'd rather just pay the 146, yeah.
So the other thing to consider with paying everything up front, not that I'm a fan of either option, I'd love it to be free. But with option one, we have to have buy-in from all three municipalities. Sure. And if we don't, then we don't go.
Right.
So I know the town of East Troy is willing to borrow for it, but we have the town of Spring Prairie, that's the unknown right now. So, and they would be at 26,000 and some change, so.
25,500 and some change.
So we would have to, make a decision if we wanted to front that and then try to get it back, so. But again, it is time sensitive because we do have areas that we can't service at this time.
When is the town of East Troy's next board meeting?
I think they're the third Monday of the month. Because we're normally the third Tuesday, and I think Barbara's the Monday before.
Yes, I believe so.
I know he called me over the weekend, but he's not going to be at that board meeting? Or he's out now?
He'll be on the third one. It came to us because the town was originally going to do this. So it came to us because Joe was out and they weren't able to have a meeting to discuss.
Okay, I want to see if I can find some middle ground here. I get that it's time sensitive, but I'm going to ask for 2 weeks.
And I'll reach out to them.
So what I'd like to do is, here's what I want to propose, and you guys poke holes in it. We go with option one. We're directing staff and our attorneys to work with town staff and attorneys. Can we get an agreement? I like the idea because it's a smaller portion. We want Spring Prairie to come to the table too, but in the amount of impact, we got to get the town of East Troy on board. If we can get them on board, then we can have agreements both in front of them and us at the next board meeting. And then we would go with option one with those agreements.
You mean option two?
I'm sorry.
Was an option two the
I said
borrowing?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Option one. Option one's the full payment.
Hang on.
If we finance, we just sign it to them.
No.
I am asking, no, I would be, yeah, we'd have to have an agreement, like, the district agreement doesn't cover this. I guess when I'm rereading this, what I'm asking for is 2 weeks to try to execute option two. So one, what are the ramifications of what I'm proposing? I shouldn't say recommending, proposing. And two, is it achievable?
So I did sign a 30-day intent letter with E1 on this. So we do get first right at refusal for that 30 days. That was executed on July 29th. So that should buy us some time in that category. I know they are moving this vehicle. It just was down in Lake Geneva yesterday, I believe they took it down there for a showing, and it's going to be in Indiana on Monday for another one. But like I said, we do have a letter of intent signed with them to have first rights at refusal of them selling it to anyone else for 30 days.
Chris, just a question for you. Would that agreement, we originally talked about that agreement would be between the village and the town of East Troy and the town of Spring Prairie to
Yeah.
assure that we get repayment. And I was just talking to trustee Smalley here, and it sounds like he's under the impression that would do the agreement with the fire district.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We were contemplating that it was going to be an agreement between the three municipalities, and they would
Yeah.
just partner up and pay the money and be done with it. So I think if I understand correctly, what we're talking about now, the village would borrow the money, right? And then the fire district would pay that back. So we would do the borrowing on the front end, and then you guys would work that into your budget going forward? Is that what's being discussed?
That's, when we had a meeting and discussed it, we discussed initially it was the town of East Troy, then it came to the village. One or the other borrowing the money, or being the financier for it. Then the agreement would be with the district. The district would then have the agreement with the municipalities to pay back.
District would have to build that agreement cost into its budget, basically.
My only concern with that is that budget is approved on a year-to-year basis, and that's what I talked to Chief DeGaro about, is we're assuming that they're going to incorporate that into that repayment into their budget every year, and there's no guarantee that they're going to. So
what I would say is that our agreement, okay, so let's say we go down this path, then our agreement between us and the district would include a requirement for the district to include because we don't do, Kayla's already left, we don't do capital smoothing yet in the agreement. You only do a cash call when it's due, but this is a capital lease, so it's due. So I think, I would say that this would represent, however we phrase this in the agreement, per the district agreement, amongst all the municipalities, that this is an annual cash call for a capital lease, and that it must be built in, and then that is the repayment mechanism. Is that what you're trying to get at?
You put it in a lot more words than we did, but yes, what you're saying, yes.
I was trying
That's where we're at.
to assuage concerns. Does that cover you guys' concerns then on that?
So the structure is going to be, there's an agreement between the village of East Troy and the fire district. The village is going to do this borrowing on the front end, and then we're going to have to work it with the verbiage of the fire district agreement to make sure that that's a cost that's going to be picked up by the fire district every year until it's paid off. Now, in practice, I mean, it'd be nice to have the town sign off on that agreement as well. It certainly wouldn't hurt, right? Because if we're going to have any pushback from them, I'd rather know it now before the village actually borrowed the money.
So I guess, though, we would write that in time for your next district board meeting, and that would get, if the district board approves it, you've approved an agreement, just like you have the authority to approve other agreements, and basically then you're committing yourself to including that in your budget request, similar to what, it's only 50. Why can't it be $1,500 like that, the weed in Booth Lake? You know?
Talk to Chief, he's right here, and go look at me.
Our toys are a little more
I
expensive.
don't want to make it more complicated, but my concern with that is the district agreement also says they can't obligate themselves to debt. So haven't they just obligated themselves to debt by making that agreement with us?
Effectively, yeah. So that's why I think the parties would need to sign off on that, and I mean Spring Prairie then as well. So, I mean, essentially, East Troy is saying, look, we're willing to finance it, we're willing to take on the obligation on the front end, but the fire district is going to assume that, which means that all the members of the fire district have to agree on the front end that, yep, we're okay with assuming that. If that's, and again, I haven't looked over your agreement and your fire district agreement in probably a couple of years. But if there's a provision in there that says the fire district can't take on debt, then yeah, you're right, that is what they're doing here.
Yeah, there is a provision for that, so I didn't think about it. I just thought of the repayment part. I didn't think of the assumption of debt.
What's the downside to option one, where the village would pony up 146,000, and then the other two would have to come up with their share?
Coming up with the money.
So other districts, other municipalities have at many times waited, and then they would issue debt when the cash call comes for capital. They haven't done set-asides always like we have. So while we have this in various reserves, it poses other, by doing that, that also gives us other challenges, but then we would use abated debt, but then that has a tax implication for our residents. So I guess I'm back to my suggestion on option 2 of asking for 2 weeks. And I'm looking for consensus here of head nods, but that we're okay with the risk of if Spring Prairie balks for some reason, that's a much smaller dollar amount. Our concern is the town of East Troy not balking.
Town of East Troy isn't going to. I just to clarify, Barb's already had conversations with them and they're ready to issue that, so. But I don't know, that's for the one lump sum payment. Can we do that as well? Is that an option?
I had mentioned that to Joe. You know, I would imagine that they would be willing to restructure that financing for the lower amount. You know, like that's the down payment, and then they would finance the rest. But, you know, you also look at the tax rate implications as well. You know, we do have the potential for our tax rate to go up anywhere from 15 cents per thousand to 35 cents per thousand outside of this.
Right.
So this would add another 30 cents per thousand. So that's just something to consider. I know the board's been pretty cautious about those tax rate increases as well.
So my concern with option 2, once again, is Spring Prairie's agreement, agreeing to do this.
Maybe we formulate the agreement and there is a provision that there's a sharing between the town of East Troy and the village, or something like that.
Yeah, for their portion, should they not proceed? Because I think either way, under option 2, we're doing 2 separate agreements, one with the town of East Troy and one with the town of Spring Prairie.
Yeah.
I have a question. Is it all, Spring Prairie is aware of what's going on, just like we are here?
I would hope so. I trust on their trustees. None of their boards have reached out to me where the town and the village has.
But I mean,
had
you
discussions.
told them what's going on.
Well, yes.
Yeah. One last question for the board. As far as paying the attorney fees to draft the agreement, do we want to charge that back, or does the village want to absorb that? Does that,
I'd split the cost. That's
Okay.
what we do. It's what we did for the Ellers
Okay.
analysis too.
so we'll include that in the agreement?
So I go back to my question about what I'm proposing. I get, every day is a challenge. Is 2 weeks untenable?
Oh, every minute right now is, we're running on borrowed time here, so we're gambling every minute that we're going past without having that kind of equipment to be able to support us. I mean, knock on wood, we made it a couple weeks now with,
Question, Joe.
Yes.
Even if for some ungodly reason we were saying, okay, you've got the okay, and tomorrow you can buy that fire truck, how long would it take before you actually had it in the firehouse ready to use?
what time did you sign it? So they'd be bringing it in Lake Mills right now.
Quick.
Yeah, so
Okay,
it would
so
be
there's not a
coming-
lag time.
Yes.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, they asked if there was a decision made, in the course of this week, that would they still be able to take it down to Indiana to show it to them down there? So that's how quick it would be here.
Can you rent it for 2 weeks?
I would like to. I tried to get them to leave it there the other night, and they said no. So,
It's an all or nothing for 'em?
yeah.
Well, you guys can pull together a special meeting relatively easy. You guys have that Zoom capability. I don't know about the town, though. Are they open to that? Are they?
So this came to us because the town can't meet for another, I believe, 2 weeks. So that's why it's sitting here. Otherwise, the town would have been the financiers on this. They would have put it in front of their board. So,
Were they prepared to just?
yes,
They weren't. So they weren't going to ask for an agreement from East Troy. They were just going to finance it.
I couldn't tell you that. Their attorney, I guess, would be a present at that meeting and probably advise them, to do that. But it was going to go in front of them before it came here. But their chairman's out.
So in practice, we're not going to be able to get an agreement from them in 2 weeks anyhow. I mean, we can get written up, but they're not going to be, they've got to meet to sign.
I think for our sake, though, we'd want to expedite this because they're probably going to want their attorney to look at it. So let's, like if we can make it a priority, that'd be awesome because then we can get it in front of their attorney fairly quickly.
Who's their lawyer?
Jim Mills, Attorney Jim Mills.
I think we're going to be meeting in 2 weeks here. They're going to be meeting in 2 weeks. So, I mean, if we had to, we could turn around and do a 5-minute Teams, meeting Tuesday. If we had to, we could even just go ahead and post it and cancel it, right? So
You guys could approve it subject to them approving it the next night.
we could put it on our agenda and say, hey, we're going to, like, both boards are approving it, in 2 weeks on that Monday. So, and I would say at that point, what you would work out with Jim Mills, it would just be like, the agreement says that if both boards approve this, then I think let's make a decision that we're going to be the debt issuer. We'll take that burden, okay, but that we'll take the administrative work. We'll split the costs amongst the calculation that you guys come up with, but our portion, the town of East Troy's portion, and the town of Spring Prairie's portion, there's an agreement between us and the town of East Troy, the agreement between us and the town of Spring Prairie. The one difference really would be between us and the town of East Troy, which would say, should the town of Spring Prairie not come to the table on this, then we will take those costs and split them 50-50 and add them to us.
So we're going to do 2 separate agreements, one with Spring Prairie and one with.
I think that's what it is.
I
Otherwise,
I think you have to, because if Spring Prairie read that, they're not going to sign it.
and that's fine, and that keeps us, that's why I added that additional clause to the town of East Troy agreement, so that moves us forward timeline-wise. I mean, we're talking 25,000, 12,005. Like, I'm not going to say no for 12,005.
And at the end of the day, if you look at the big picture, to replace this engine in 5 years is going to be $1.3 million. So this is saving $1 million because we're not going to bring a new engine in. This is going to be replacing that engine. So, I mean, this is great work, for our constituents. Hard to swallow at this point in time, but great work. Thanks, Joe.
No, I agree, and from a service standpoint, solves some service problems too.
Yeah,
I have to ask, though, Spring Prairie's meeting is next Monday, correct?
yes.
And you're going to be there, I'm assuming?
Well, we'll see.
Well, okay.
If they
well,
invite me, yeah.
Your plan is,
Yeah.
right?
We'll see what conversations we can have before that.
What's been discussed then can be shared and hopefully get them on board?
I mean, it seems like the cleanest way to do it would just be a single agreement between the town of East Troy and the village of East Troy, where we just contemplate you guys are going to pick up that 24 grand, and then if Spring Prairie does come to the party, then we just do an amendment or something that makes clear that they're picking up their part
That
of
works
it.
for me.
I mean, in practice, it'll all run through the fire district at the end of the day anyhow, but yeah, keep it simple on the front end, and then if they do ultimately approve it, then we can do another agreement at that point or whatever.
That works for me.
Yeah.
Work for you guys?
Works for me.
Okay, so I think we need a motion out of this. Well, okay, so we have direction to staff. So are we good with direction to staff to draft that? And so can you make sure that you keep Jason very close on this, just for coordination purposes and Joe? And if there's any issues or concerns, I guess, since Joe Clarkowski, to me, Joe's.
There's a lot of Joes.
A lot of Joes around here. Yeah. If, there's a lot of Jasons, too. If Joe Clarkowski's still out, we can coordinate with Barb, and you can help with that. So, okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would encourage everybody to listen to this week's podcast episode of The Economics of Everyday Things featuring firefighters. And the very first discussion is why capital is so much. It's exciting stuff. All right. Where are we at? 6, direction to staff regarding any changes or additions to services for 2025 operations budget, as well as budget assumptions. We should assume that more stuff at the fire district will break.
I will just really briefly summarize this. So this is the opportunity for the board to give us any direction for any service level changes. I gave you an example in the memo. I gave you the background of when we've done market updates to the salary structure, and am seeking just board direction on what I'm proposing. Right now, I'm relying on the city managers network just to see what the chatter is. I'm also awaiting a wage survey that Cottingham Butler, which was formerly Carlson Detman, presents to us, and that should be coming out any week now. But right now, I'm proposing cost of living adjustment at 3%, performance range increases at 3.3%. Those are different because I do have some concerns about keeping them the same. It creates some disparity. I gave you what the union contract was negotiated at, and then health insurance, we're just inserting 10%, which is typically what we have put in there previously. Then I just gave you a summary of the net new construction. I was happy to see it's 2.05%, which is the second highest in the last 14 years. And commercial was your highest component of that, and it's all related to your TID 4 new construction. So, and then I put a pretty little chart there that shows you that spike last year and this year, so that helps us with our levy limits this year a little bit.
Are you looking for any feedback outside of wages when you say service levels?
Nope, just, if the board has concerns about what I'm proposing as the initial assumptions, which we can always tweak as we move through this process, and any questions you might have.
No concerns here. Seems to make sense.
Okay, so we're good on direction to staff being what Eileen laid out. Excellent. Moving on. Item 7, consider offer amendment to offer to purchase from Bryan Land Development LLC. This is just an extension on some property over related to TED 4.
I'll move to approve the amendment to offer to purchase.
All right. Any questions or discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 8, consider and possible approval of final development plans for prior approved plan development districts, PDD, and provide policy direction to staff regarding PDD approval process. So this is specific to, we have some difficult ordinance language to parse, which means that we need to provide an approval for some prior items here, and then we need to provide direction to staff on this, fixing this conflicting language. So let's take the approvals first. Do we have a motion?
Thanks. I'll make a motion to approve the final development plans made by the Planning Commission, Honey Creek Planning Development District, the Lofts, originally approved 2020, amended approval 2022, adapted reuse of 2931 Union Street, originally approved 2022, amended approval 2023, and Overlook Ridge approved 2024.
I'll second that.
Okay, any questions or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? motion carries, and I'd say direction of staff is let's get an ordinance change so that the planning commission has the authority we always thought that they had, and that doesn't need to come to us.
Yes,
Agreed?
yes, yes.
Okay. All right, ordinances and resolutions. Ordinance 2024-10, amending Chapter 44 of Emergency Government. We had this last time Jeremy presented, and he made a couple of those updates that we discussed. Any questions for him?
I'll move to approve the ordinance 2024-10.
I'll second that.
Okay, any questions or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I think we know what the fire chief's report is. Need some equipment. We've already gone over the airport manager's quarterly report. Anything else we need to talk about? Emergency services district minutes from June 18th, Jason?
The only call that I have is we did have the Ellers fire study, so we're just waiting to discuss. I would assume we'll get with you guys eventually to.
Yeah, we should put that on an agenda once we get through all the stuff tonight. Might make sense to have Kayla come back. Have we sent that out to everybody? Did everybody get a copy of that? Yeah, if we can get a copy of that sent out to everybody. But one of the recommendations from Kayla is smoothing of capital for stopping some of the problems we discussed tonight. So, anything else you want to have? Okay.
Do we have, I only look at 1 month here, but fire calls are definitely up this year.
Just a
EMS looks pretty flat. I mean,
Yeah,
which
we
is
had-
I'm really happy about. But fire calls do seem to be up a little.
EMS calls, it'd be nice to have a little bit more because that's revenue.
Oh, yeah,
And 60% of our revenue is calls, so that would be nice.
Yeah.
But as far as fire calls, I think a lot has been environmental, with the, rainy conditions we've had and stuff like that. So
Thanks.
How much are those fire calls due to like rolling a truck or an engine due to a vehicle accident
we have
versus a
to
building?
go back through, look at, I don't have that.
Yeah, more time. We could have that conversation. Okay. Anything else? Anybody has anything for emergency services? Okay, Booth Lake Memorial Park minutes, other than invasive species, which we're going to eradicate. Anything else we should know about?
Yeah, we've had a lot of traffic this year with the inflatables. So last year we did the adult one, this year we did the kids one. So we have more people there, and I think we have more people that are not residents. So we've had a couple pushbacks, and we've had to call the police. So Sean and Bonnie are handling that well. So.
All right. Do we want to do closed session? Or?
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, we have to.
All right. Then I will make a motion to go to closed session again, adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 1985E for the purpose of deliberating, negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or the conducting of other specified public business, whatever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, offer to purchase property, environmental liability issue, and possible fire district loan, and 1985F for the purpose of considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories for disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigations, and 1985C for the purpose of considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, administration department.
Could you repeat that?
Where's Joe?
Second.
Where's Joe? I think we need
I'll
some
second.
oxygen. We need some oxygen.
40. Roll call vote.
President Johnson.
Yes.
Trustee Alexander. John.
Yes.
Trustee Holm. Trustee Nugent. Trustee Renucci. 40. Trustee Smalley. And Trustee Wisniewski.